Hi, I'm Catherine Brown Ramsperger. You can call me Kathy. I'm an author, coach, and teacher from shoresofourSouls.com. I decided to do a few Facebook Lives to launch some books I love during COVID times, or cocooning times as I call it, when bookshops and libraries were closed, and some are still closed. Interest did a lot more than blossom. It exploded. So we're entering June with every Thursday booked. I want to thank each and every one of you writers and readers who made this happen. It's my great pleasure to connect writers and readers. That's why I'm here. It's why I write. On a sadder note, I also wanted to acknowledge what's going on in our nation during this time. We all have a collective grief over the death and the violence that's been taking place. Something it needs to change in our country, and it is changing right now, even if we can't see it yet. I posted about this, and so you know my views. It's my belief that writers need to keep writing, especially now. And that is one amazing reason that I have the writer I have on today. I also want to introduce and welcome Kaylee Mullis. Will be assisting with our comments and questions today. So go ahead and question and comment away. She'll be monitoring that, and we will allow time for it. And now, ta-da, one of those writers who has kept writing and now has 4 books to offer you. She and all authors I'm interviewing during June are published by my publisher, Touchpoint Press. Welcome. So Christie Leigh Babirad is a Long Island author who has published 4 books, 2 of which just launched. Congrats, Christie Leigh.
Thank you.
She has 3 novels. Today we'll discuss Where You Are, which is a sequel to her first novel, As the Winds Change. I really enjoyed them both. Her work is both an engaging love story and a spiritual exploration of what happens when our loved ones die. Christie Leigh, in addition to being an author, has a BA in communications and is also a poet and a journalist like me. So here are a couple of reviews for both of these books in the series. Reviewers say, As the Winds Change follows April Miller's struggle to free herself from past hurts and misunderstandings. With the company of Johnny, a ghost from the past, we share the valuable insights that they discover. Each chapter begins with an inspiring quotation, which provides thought and direction. As the Winds Change moves at a lively and interesting pace. And I feel like they both offer similar messages and themes, including those inspiring quotations, but go a different route, each one of them. So for this very new book, which just launched, the South Shore Long Island Book Club calls it a touching, inspirational sequel to As the Winds Change, a must read. It is a story that anyone in their late 20s can relate to, and it's inspiring to all of us. So again, congratulations, Christie Leigh. You have anything to say, or shall we just launch right into the questions?
I just want to thank you so much for having me, and I'm very excited for the questions.
It's my honor and pleasure to host you. I think people are going to get a lot out of this chat. Thanks for being on Story Hour.
Absolutely.
So why did you become an author, a writer?
I became a writer. I think it's natural. I've always been interested in storytelling and any kind of storytelling, whether it's books, movies, television shows, dance, music videos, any storytelling. But writing was my personal way to express myself. And I started very young, and it was just something natural, and feeling my way through it and having the confidence to express those thoughts and to write what's true to my personal heart. So it's very, very, very personal. A lot of the stories, it's very, they're not me, but they're variations. Like certain things are my personal feelings, obviously. So
Or do you find that you have a little bit of yourself in all of the characters, or is April more like you, the protagonist?
April is definitely more like me. And As the Winds Change in particular, that story started over 10 years ago when I was in my early 20s and I was writing a screenplay. I wrote it as a screenplay first. And so April was my way of working through the idea of a friendship that was so strong and then just dropped off. That's always been a big problem with me, the goodbyes without the closure, any kind of closure. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was the main storyline. And so with Where You Are, what's exciting about that in particular is I feel like I grow with April, obviously, because it was my way of, getting through those feelings back in my early 20s. And now April reflects more of what my thought processes and things that
Yeah.
I'm thinking about at this point in my life. And I also think, too, because she's not following the path that, like, just by the way her life worked, it's not she's not married, she doesn't have children, in her 30s or early 30s, and I think that's a voice that needs to be heard, because I think there's a lot more people just like myself that the timeline of life has gone in a different way. And
Mhm. Well, I think our books mature, our writing matures as we mature, and
yeah,
that I totally agree with you.
absolutely.
So I enjoyed how you wove two love stories into your other side plot, other side heaven plot. Um, why did you decide to write what I call cross genre fiction? Or did it just come to you and you wrote it and then figured it out from there?
It honestly came to me as far as cross genre. If you're referring to heaven and the spirituality side and then the love story, that's always been something that I've personally been interested in, that our lives have more meaning, that it's not just this place that we live in right now, that we do transition to a heaven. And so that was definitely an element that I wanted to incorporate. Um, Growing up with, I grew up with my parents, but my grandparents as well in the same house. And so I wasn't shielded from funerals and having that kind of perspective. And I think that that's kind of influenced my interest, that they're not gone, they're still here with us. And so that's my interest. And as far as the two love stories, they're I believe that all our relationships should have a depth to them, but they're they mean something different to us depending on the person. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, it did very well. Um, yeah, they stay in our heart, and I agree. It's my belief system too. Was it difficult deciding on who your protagonist would end up with? Not to give a spoiler.
No, not at all. It wasn't difficult because, as I was starting to mention a little bit, Johnny and Luke, they have different places in April's heart, but they're both very powerful. It's just one is is has a specific place in her life and her purpose, and then the other one the opposite. So it wasn't difficult to see who they ended up with, but I wanted each one I didn't want one to be less significant than the other, because they're both equal in presence.
You did a good job with that. Very
Thank
good
you.
job. I like how you made the plot so they were able to be equal.
Yeah, thank you.
So, uh, a personal question: did anything happen in your own life to precipitate wondering what heaven is like, other than having life and death around you in your growing up?
I think that's just personally, I've always been a very sensitive person. And I think that that was just something that came naturally. And I would read a lot of books on people that had like, life, like had those encounters, those encounters where they pass away and they go to another place briefly and then they come back to
Right.
Earth. And I've read a lot about that. And
Huh, me too.
and I think, yeah, and I just think that it's comforting, but I've seen signs from my grandparents, which I incorporated into As the Winds Change the Dimes, that was kind of what I believe to be my grandfather and my grandmother. And and that belief, it gives you hope, and I do believe it's true, especially when you read all um the accounts. And
Yeah, I do too.
and like I said, just growing up the way I did, I was around older people, probably equal to, if not more, than my own peers. So it kind of alters your view a bit.
I find it amazing that people can get to their 50s and never have even lost a loved one, because that has not been my experience. But it is true. And I think for those who haven't experienced it, your kind of writing, your kind of fiction would give them comfort when the time came.
Thank you.
That's why I think it goes beyond people in their 20s. So.
I appreciate that a lot, because that is definitely one of the things that I want, because I know there's so many people out there that have lost, including myself, but that have lost loved ones, and especially the ones that pass away well before their time, that are way too young, and in our emotions, they're too young to have passed away, or tragically. So I'm glad that my book does have that, because
Yeah, it doesn't sugarcoat it. And speaking of this, speaking of death, wow, did you choose a way to die that I fear most?
I'm so sorry about that.
No, it was good. It had me on the edge of my seat, because, the reader knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, so how did you come up with that? I'm not going to give that away either.
I think
Go
it
ahead.
was natural, once again, the way that it happened. It was just part of, I knew that it needed to just happen to one character. Like, I knew that this incident had to happen to one person. It couldn't happen to a bunch of people. And it just went along with the storyline, honestly. And I think to a
It
degree,
did, didn't it?
we all have a little bit of fear of that. I mean, it's not. I think that that's definitely a fear. And then incorporating that, I had a lot of help from this friend of mine in Montpaigne, who's a high school track friend, and she's a medical professional, and she helped me with all of the research that I sometimes don't like to get caught up in, but she made it fun, and she explained how logistically this would happen, so that
It was very, very, I don't know. I think I dream of ways to have that kind of thing happen. But
that's not good.
I always wanted, when I got into a plane, I always wanted to put a helmet on my kids.
Yeah, no, I've always had that kind of fear, so it's
Yeah. Well, I think it's a pretty human fear. So you're going to have to read it, people, to find out what happens. It's not what you think. Um, so what was the hardest part of writing a sequel? I'm I must have rewritten my sequel 50 times. It's been much more difficult for me than writing the first book. What about you?
personally, the sequel was easier, because I mean, I had written two other books, so I was a little bit more confident. The sequel I enjoyed more, because I got to incorporate more imagination, and I got to incorporate, quite honestly, like dreams that you know they're personal even to me, and that I haven't personally experienced yet. Um, so it was a lot of fun and it flowed. I don't have I don't know how to explain it properly, but I don't have a way of sticking. I don't have a way of sticking with projects unless it does come somewhat naturally. Like it has to at some point, it has to have a certain degree of flow to it. Otherwise, I'm like, oh, I can't do this. It's over. So.
So, just a second. So I think it's about time we go to comments and questions. Kaylee, I'm going to unmute you.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be on Story Hour for the first time. I'm excited to read some comments here. We have a lot of hellos. So first, we have a hello from Shanessa. She says, hi, Kathy and Christy. We also have a hello or a hi from across the pond from Marilyn L. Rice, who's a fellow author. We have 2 thumbs up from Tim, and he's congratulating you again on this book. We also have a question from Tatiana Ramzoff. So she says hello, and she's wondering, is there a time or a time of day or a place you prefer to write?
That's a good question. I write whenever the thoughts come to me. So it's very scattered, my process. It really depends, but I think what's really important is routine. So when I'm working on a project, I have to do something toward it every single day. So even if I have a rough day, I have to at least look at it. I have to look at what I've done so far and have put a list together of what I think the next scene should be. So it definitely has to be an everyday activity, but it depends on the muse and when the inspiration comes, or I have to just sit down and do it at some point because I'm like, well, you have to put the work in today. Thank you for that question.
Anything else?
Yes, there's one more question from, oh, just kidding. There's 2 more questions. We have another one from Tatiana. She's asking, what is it that you want me to take away from As the Winds Change series?
The one thing that I would like people to take away from the As the Winds Change series is that everyone has their own timeline in life, but I believe that it's never too late for anyone, no matter what age you are. I believe it's never too late to find your way, find a new path, to forgive. It's never too late.
Awesome. So we have one last question from Shanessa. She's asking, what's next for you? What, are you working on another book?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. I am working on another book slowly. It's a Christmas story, another Christmas story. So I am working on that. And I also write poetry. So I am hoping, I submitted a full-length poetry book to a publishing company. And I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that that happens, because that's definitely another way that I express myself besides through fiction is poetry. So thank you.
Yeah.
We have another one from Shanessa. She's asking, do you outline your books ahead of time?
That's a great question. I do, to a degree, like to a certain point. So I'll write it like, actually the way I started off writing screenplays, I'll go scene by scene. So I'll figure out what the chapter is going to be about, and then I'll put bullet points under it of the different things that I think are going to happen. I know usually how it begins and how it ends, but there's always a part that's left out to just see what comes along.
And we have a question from Noelle Puglisi. She's asking, how do you decide on a title?
Title, that's another thing that's it's a great question. I can't even explain, honestly, how it comes to me. I mean, I think that with the stories that I've had, As the Winds Change and Where You Are, it was from a spiritual standpoint. So As the Winds Change was my whole idea of, I particularly love the fall. And I believe that it's a time of rebirth and growth. So I wanted to have that kind of message in my novel, that as seasons change, things get better. And that's how I came up with it. And where you are, that's, once again, it's spiritually related. So it honestly, it comes to me in like what the topics are in the book. The Christmas break, that's, heartbreak and something that happens. So, and I try to just make it short and to the point. Thank you.
Beautiful title. We're going to come back to more questions in just a minute, and keep them coming. We love these questions. Thank you, Kaylee. Okay. So I love the quotes, Christie Leigh, at the beginning of each chapter. And I especially love any quote by Khalil Gibran. He's the person I quoted in my novel. Do you have a favorite quote from a favorite author other than that one, or any favorite quote in your book that speaks the most?
He has a lot of great quotes, and I love quotes by Rumi. All the quotes that I put in my book, I absolutely love, of course. But one came to me when you mentioned to me earlier about like a quote. One in particular came to me, so I'm gonna read it to you. I wrote it down, but it's an ancient Chinese proverb, and I read about it first in this book by Laura Lynn Jackson, The Light Between Us. She's another Long Island author, and at the beginning, I don't know if it was that book or another book, but at the beginning of it, it has this ancient Chinese proverb. An invisible thread connects those who are destined to meet, regardless of time and place and circumstance. The thread may stretch or tangle, but it will never break. And I think that goes along with my books as well. So that's personally what I love, and I believe in that.
I do too. So that's really special to me, and I didn't see it coming. My daughter is adopted from China, and they have that legend that she was my daughter the minute she was born. So it's called a red thread. And so thank you. That hit me right in the heart.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Khalil Gibran and that in common. What's the one thing did you have one challenge on your road to publication, or was it seamless and easy for you?
My road to publication, I would say it wasn't seamless. It was a long one, because I needed to grow up and I needed to have confidence in my own voice. Mm-hmm. So it started off, like the first long piece that I wrote started off in my early 20s. That was the first time like I ever wrote anything of length. Before that, I was writing poetry and short stories and that sort of thing. But
totally different animal, isn't it?
It is. And so I felt like it was a very long road, and I had these friends that are actually children's book authors, and they kept telling me they had read the screenplay of As the Winds Change. I'd written it as a screenplay, as a stage play, anything to avoid the novel. And they kept telling me that, like, you have to novelize the story. And out of all the screenplays that I had written, I wrote like 7 of them, I think 7 or 8 of them. That was the one that pulled to me the most, was As the Winds Change. And that was the one that it helped bring me personally out to another perspective, another side, by putting together the dialogue between Johnny and April in particular. I worked at the dialogue and I ended up like crying as I was writing it. And then, like I said, when it became, and that was the first time I had an experience like that, where it really was, besides my poetry, of course, where I really felt impacted and like, wow, this has power. These words have power. This emotion has power. But yeah, it took me a long time. It was 10 plus years until I finally submitted. And then as far as the submission process, I got it on the 3rd try. I submitted the first time and the publishing company said, we want this and that changed. And so I did that. And then they came back to me and they said, but we need to explore this a little bit more. And I did that. And then the third time was when I was accepted, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because it was, I don't want anything to come to me easily, and it hasn't. So it makes it even more sweet when it does.
It's true. It's true. Although I think you deserve it easily.
Thank you.
But
Thank you so much.
so can you talk a little bit about your journal that accompanies this series, correct? It
This
accompanies,
series, as well as the Christmas break, thank you.
so it's all 3 books.
It's all 3 books, and I have the book right here. It's called Reading the Heart Companion Journal, books by Christie Leigh Babirad.
Bring it a little bit bring it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So people can see
Yeah.
the type.
And I think this was a lot of fun to put together. And I think I've always been putting together things like this when I would put together poetry collections. So I divided this book into 3 chapters, I believe, and they're on different topics: love and forgiveness, passion and purpose, and another one that I can't think offhand. But anyway,
They'll have to buy it and see.
They'll have to buy it and see. Thank you. I really appreciate anybody who purchases this, but as well as where you are. But I took quotes from my books, from The Christmas Break, Where You Are, and As the Winds Change. And they all kind of have a certain message to them. And then I want this journal to be your own personal diary journal, and help you uncover your own stories, see all the blessings that you have in your life, see where passions that you may have left behind that you might want to pursue, people, like in my case, who have dropped off, and maybe writing out the dialogue of between you and them, if you got that chance, which I didn't get that chance, and that was how I worked it out in the story. But that's my objective, is basically for people to see their own stories with more light and beauty. So I hope you all enjoy.
Well, that I'm going to turn it back over to Kaylee for a minute, and let's see if we have any final questions. And
so we don't have any final questions, but I just wanted to mention a few comments that I didn't mention previously, just because I wanted to focus on the questions. But Tatiana Ramsperger said she can't wait to read your books. And Marilyn Rice again wanted to say, Christie, a woman after my own heart and belief. WTG sister. I'm not sure what WTG means, but I'm sure maybe writing? Is it writing sister? Or is it something else?
It must be.
Writing
I'm
sister.
terrible with the acronyms. I'll realize it like after we have this broadcast, I'll realize what it meant.
I'm surprised that came to me in this moment. Marilyn, if you're still watching, I'm sorry if I butchered the acronym, but those were the last 2 comments that I wanted to mention.
Very nice, thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. You've been such a huge boon to me today. I really appreciate your being here, and thank you. And thank you to Christie Leigh Babirad. I just want to leave you with the primary hope she has for readers, or that her words and stories comfort and inspire you, letting you know that you're never alone. That's so beautiful and so needed right now. She wants her readers to know that their feelings have a real place, and that this life can be so much bigger and grander if we let love and optimism fully into our hearts. Now, there is a woman after my own heart. Thank you, Christie Leigh. I totally agree. And that message is so needed right here, right now. And I'm going to end with my tea bag wisdom as usual. I didn't expect this one. It's not really a proverb, but we got that from Christie Leigh today. Flower power. So the flowers are blooming. It's almost summer. We have a lot to be thankful for in spite of everything that's going on in our world. It also spoke to me because I'm a child of the 70s, and I just remember flower power, and it did change things. And so I just want to thank Christie Leigh for showing up, for writing her beautiful books that are going to heal a lot of people. And do you have any last words, Christie Leigh?
No, just thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everybody who commented and liked, and I can't wait for you all to read where you are and to take part in the companion journal.
And where can they find it?
They can find it on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, and they can also follow me on my Facebook page at author Christie Leigh Babirad. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kaylee.
You, Christie Leigh, and thank everybody for your comments and questions and for your listening. We wouldn't be doing this without you. And I am Kathy Ramsperger from shoresofourSouls.com. Till next week, everybody take care. Bye.